Today we're tackling an issue that affects every part of the supply chain, but rarely gets the attention it deserves until something goes wrong, namely freight security. Now, as logistics networks become more digital, organized criminals are becoming more sophisticated, with cargo theft and freight fraud presenting growing challenges for shippers, freight forwarders, and carriers alike. So, how can the industry stay one step ahead while maintaining the speed and efficiency that modern logistics demands? I'm delighted to be joined by someone who's at the forefront of that conversation. Ewa Węgorkiewicz from Trans.eu joins us today to discuss the changing nature of freight crime, the importance of trusted digital freight networks, and why Trans.eu has partnered with TAPA, the Transported Asset Protection Association, to help raise security standards across the industry.
Welcome to Logistics Business Conversations, the podcast exploring the ideas and insights shaping today's logistics industry. Featuring leading voices from across the sector, we examine key trends, emerging challenges, and the innovations driving the future of supply chains.
Ewa, welcome to Logistics Business Conversations. Great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Peter. Great being here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a great pleasure. Now, Ewa, cargo theft and freight fraud, they're making headlines almost every day or every week. Has the problem genuinely become worse over the last few years, or are we just being made more aware of it? We're just reading more about it now.
I think it's both, but it's becoming different than what it used to be. And we see, I think, two dominant patterns right now. First one, what we call shell companies. So basically criminals buying legit registered companies from the owners that are retiring with no succession plan. And they run small, honest operations, and they are hijacked by this new shell owner into something that is definitely not legit and definitely not with a good intention. So this is trend number one. And trend number two is this, what we call corporate identity hijacking. So with internet all over the place, with AI, it's becoming very, very easy to lose your own digital footprint in the cloud and basically be taken over by this new guy with very bad intentions that is using your corporate, internet identity to make cargo theft as much possible as it is. And AI definitely not helping in this whole situation. It's a clear force multiplier. It's becoming very, very easy to forge any kind of document you want. You cannot trust a PDF anymore. It's a piece of cake for any cargo theft guy out there. And it's not blind, right? It's not like it's an accident that the cargo gets stolen. 1 in 5 reported theft globally involve very high level of intel that is taken into this. And last but not least, we also see trends around timing. Fridays, you have 48 to 72 hours of the truck being somewhere out there that you cannot easily track down because not everybody is working, right? So people don't even see this missing before Monday very often. And just to finish up with some sad stats, cargo theft in Europe, in terms of losses, jumped by over 400% in 2023 compared to 2022 and 1,000% compared to 2021. So it's not like a gradual shift, right?
This isn't a guy or a lady with a laptop. This is organized crime on a large scale.
Absolutely it is. And as I said, multi-jurisdictional. So it's very, very tricky for Europol, for European jurisdiction to track this down, especially that we have a governmental lab on top. So I don't know if you know, cargo theft is treated like there was a thief stealing an iPhone from a store. So consequences are similar. The prosecution is very similar. That's why it's very, very, very inefficient to track this down and to actually take consequences, and thefts know about this. So it's becoming much more scattered. Last year's, the trend was more like, 20% of the guys make 80% of the damage. Today, it's very different. There are much more of these guys at lower scale, but the damage is overall much bigger.
It seems like a very modern theft. I'm an old-fashioned guy, I like to think of traditions. And, back in the old days, we used to break into a parked trailer and steal our goods that way. That was, probably very much a local issue and something that could be left a physical footprint that could perhaps lead to a prosecution. But I guess the criminals have evolved as the technology evolves. So what does a modern freight fraud look like today?
Very different because of multiple reasons. So first of all, fragmentation, right? In Europe alone, you have hundreds of thousands of companies. And then can you vet all of them? Can you make sure that all of them are legit? No, you cannot. The problem is that for many situations, where does the theft happen? The theft happens in digital world, right? Digital space. And now, how does it start? It doesn't start with someone physically going to the store and stealing something or physically overtaking a company. It's digital abuse and it's cyber theft that is so popular. Things can be as easy as taking over a domain that looks like it's .gmail.com, but at the end, one letter changes and it's not Gmail, it's something else. To much more sophisticated. We heard cases about people getting recruited to legit companies. And the recruitment was a bit off because it was all online. You'd have never interviewed the new employee in person. But this was already a planned crime that the guy was supposed to get into this company, become this dispatcher of a legit company that has been operating in the market for years. And then with this plan in his mind of actually stealing cargo on his 7th working day, right? So this is really from this low level of, okay, I'll just change the domain, try to steal the domain somehow, to really being an insider in a legit company and actually attempting to steal the goods. And technology evolves with this too, right? For example, today I'm able to see all of these shell companies I was talking about because we are checking at the vetting process. Are there any dependencies between, was the company taken over some time ago? Did the owners sell the company? Was there a legit succession plan? Is the new owner any connection to something that has something to do with fraud, before this?
Previously.
So we are able to see there's relationships because we also learn with the tests, right? We're not staying behind. Most important thing is that theft does not happen, 7 days after somebody joins a new platform. We see this as pattern, right? So we see, okay, these guys have 5 identified locations. Why are they suddenly logging in from location 6, 7, 8? These guys are usually looking for this kind of loads. Why are they suddenly looking for something totally different that by coincidence is a high value good, right? So there's a lot of patterns that you can observe with technology while observing the digital space everybody is operating in. What you do to let them in is just one small piece of the story, because everybody can forge anything they want at the entrance, right? They can make an insurance paper look like it's theirs. They can fake the identity card. Like AI can do anything. The thing is how you monitor them once already being on the platform, because there are multiple signs that something is not going in the right way.
So the criminals are using the technology to exploit vulnerabilities in, I guess, in the supply chain, generally speaking, shippers, freight forwarders, carriers, the digital marketplaces. So how is the industry able to defend itself against criminals using the latest tools?
There are 2 sides of the story, right? Technology should take the responsibility, these digital spaces should take responsibility of preventing this. And the goal shouldn't be to put this on the user, on the new company, to somehow, authorize themselves by taking 500 different steps. As I mentioned, with AI, they will be able to do this in an easy way. The verification happens automatically in the background. And at the moment we let people in, we are checking everything that they're using, as I mentioned before, right? And this we're doing at scale using AI in our favor, not against us. And it's very important to do this all the time on a continuous basis. Verified digital identity, not only documents. Do not believe any PDFs on its own. Every time the pattern changes, it means that something is not going in the right way. Be always suspicious of urgency and unusual good rates. On platforms like Trans.eu, whenever something is too good to be true, it's usually the case.
Yeah, it's such a well-known expression, and it really applies in this case.
Absolutely. And all the things that I said move from this one-time verification to continuous verification. It's a must. And everybody that fails at this continuous verification is simply out of this digital space that you are trying to protect. Otherwise, you're becoming your own trap.
So would you say then the logistics industry, by embracing the digital freight exchange principle, because they harness the benefits such as, the speed and efficiency, would that also help them to protect themselves against these threats because of the due diligence that freight exchange such as Trans.eu would have in place?
The security is number one priority. Like, it's not an option, it's a must. Because if you think about everything that freight exchanges embrace, it's trust. How can you build trust if you don't find a secure way to provide the security for everybody that is part of this game, right? You have shippers, you have forwarders, you have carriers. If there is no security, there's no trust. So there's no point in what we are doing, right? And there are different angles of how you build the security, how you build this trust, this whole cybersecurity approach. At the moment, you let people in, but most importantly, after they have already been in your space, right? So continuous monitoring of the patterns of their behavior, anything that you find risky. On the other hand side, if you treat security in terms of like, how do you want to build this? Like, last thing we did with TAPA, for example, is inviting highest secure carriers to our private exchange that we call Trusted Carrier Exchange, that allows only those carriers with highest TSR certification to be able to pick up the loads, especially for the high value goods, right? It's private and it's allowed only for those with this highest TSR1 standards. That makes it basically impossible to be at any lowest risk level.
Right. So Eva, you've introduced a few acronyms there. We've got TAPA, we've got TSR. Could you just explain TAPA, Transported Asset Protected Association, and the TSR, the Trucking Security Requirements Certification? What they are and why do they matter?
TSR is an independently audited standard. It's not a self-declared claim, right? This is very important. So TAPA EMEA, as you mentioned, Transported Asset Protection Association, is basically a non-profit industry body that has spent over 2 decades building the benchmark for the industry, building this security benchmark for supply chain security. Being TSR 1, the highest bar is like active alarm systems, GPS tracking, specific driver requirements, protocols. And level 2, so TSR 2, is basically a defined minimum baseline. And the key here in TAPA is that it's independently audited, right? So the carrier doesn't self-certify, TAPA controls, maintains, and manages the whole audit, let's say, and certification. And what is very important, it's not one-time exercise, it's on ongoing basis. So you can have TSR certification and lose it also after some time if you do not comply with what is needed. And this is how fundamentally different this is from what we discussed earlier, no? A carrier, I don't know, uploading a PDF with his insurance or with a statement that I'm a great carrier. Well, it doesn't work like this with TAPA. And especially for high value cargo, so think about pharma, electronics, automotive, TSR 1 with SOC monitoring is moving like from nice to have to an absolute expected baseline for shippers and also insurance, right? Because insurance also want to make sure that whatever, cargo insurance they give is because they have TSR 1 in the background. So certifications aren't just claimed, they are controlled and maintained by this non-profit compliance framework. And this is solving one of the biggest issues in logistics that we have, relying on the information that you cannot actually verify. With TAPA, it's verified.
So do you think security standards like these will become a competitive advantage rather than just simply a compliance exercise?
It's not about the carriers only having more loads. Like in theory, yes, but it's a fundamental change. It's a trust becoming this commercial asset, your competitive advantage, your strategic partnership towards the others. And if I think about 5 strategic advantages that it actually brings, obviously number 1 is access to higher value freight, right? So all these industries that I mentioned will not take a random carrier without this certification because there's too much at stake. Nobody transporting, I don't know, €1 million worth of cargo in a truck will turn to somebody that does not have TSR 1 certification. At the same time, price becomes less important, right? Shipper is willing to pay this extra margin for somebody he can trust because there's too much at stake, right? For TAPA carriers, faster sales cycle, right? They have their ICP, their sweet spot of industries that they get the loads from, right? And they somehow fall into this ICP at the same time because they have the certificates that everybody is looking for. This natural creates this fourth pillar, which is long-term customer relationship. Once you are already working for a tier 1 shipper in this high value good industry, it's not easy that you will, run away from this. People will run away from this long-term relationship because you build this relation on trust and time. And last but not least, I mean, it's obvious. It takes no saying that it's much stronger market reputation, and trust is really becoming an economic.
Would you say, in practice, how does it work? Is there a, you obviously, if you select as a shipper or a freight forwarder, if you select the cheapest option, you're not going to get TAPA. But is it on your platform? Is it clear and obvious that you're getting TSR1 certification when you choose a specific option?
That's a very good question, actually. It has not been that obvious until very recently. So until actually July 1st, when we launched the first private freight exchange that actually groups TSR1 certified carriers. But why we created this trusted carrier exchange on the technology of Trans.eu is because TAPA members kept coming back with the same issue. So I transport these high value goods. How do I easily streamline those to a group of TSR certified carriers? I don't have any digital space where I can do this, right? At the same time, there are only a few hundred TSR1 certified carriers in Europe, and they say, hey, I have to call everyone one by one, put a lot of effort on sales. How can I actually get access to everybody that requires my services? Can we create a space like this? So this is when TAPA and us had an idea. We have this long-standing technology, like proven by over 2 decades in the market, where we connect demand and the offering, right? But why don't we do this in a different way? It's not an open freight exchange. It's a very private community where these two groups of people, so the ones looking for TSR1 carriers and TSR1 carriers looking for loads requiring those requirements, can get together and can actually, exchange in a very secure environment and just, keep their business going, right? In a very easy way. And this is how the certified carrier exchange was launched July 1st for everybody that requires this
Technology
kind of
often gets blamed for creating complexity, but I'm hearing from you, Ewa, that the digital platforms such as yours are actually making the freight more secure whilst actually essentially remaining quite simple for users.
Absolutely. So the main idea here is to create this secure space. Why now? Well, organized crime has seriously moved to exploiting exactly this layer that we used to call good enough, right? So what I mentioned before, this self-declared documents, certifications, whatever. So there is a layer in industry space, which is called TAPA, that we can trust. We can trust these certifications, but in a very user-friendly, easy to understand technology environment with TAPA's certifications, we put all this to make this user experience super easy, right? Super simple. At the same time, maintaining the highest possible bar of security, because this is what matters most, right? We hope to scale this to prove this is working and to take this to the next level.
Is there a trade-off between carrying out rigorous security checks and maybe slowing down the speed that modern logistics demands?
Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes, because it's always a triage. So in spot market, in spot market becoming super important right now. I don't know if you notice, but because of a lot of macroeconomic issues, just take the diesel prices recently, right? A lot of carriers who are stuck on this long-term pricing agreements with the shippers or forwarders are simply declining. Are declining committed prices, are declining committed volume, because it makes no sense for them, because they're operating below any kind of possible margin that they can accept. So what's happening? All this is moving to spot. Okay, a lot of volume on spot, but spot is a triage. As we said, there's always a trade-off, and it's a triage of three things, as usually a triage. It's about speed, it's about security, and it's about the price at the same time. So you always need to take something. That's why what we want to create in the platform is, depending what matters most to you, right? 60% of the parties wanting to register to Trans.eu are rejected. I would be a very happy CCO if we were letting in everybody that is registering, but because of security standards, we are not. So every time we're not sure if the company is legit, if the company has legit connections to any other company, if the owner has, a background that we don't question, every time this kind of uncertainty comes up, we don't let them register.
Excuse me for interrupting. So where are the most common failure points then when it comes to certification here?
It's actually about getting the access and maintaining the access to public freight exchange. So we are talking not even about this highest security bar level, right? That TSR1 private freight exchange is about. I'm talking about a regular public freight exchange. The most common blockers are, you are trying to register as a member of Raben or DHL, but you made a tiny little change in the domain that proves you are actually not Raben dispatcher or DHL dispatcher. You're just pretending to be. It's the most common scenario, but it's the easiest scenario, you can imagine. So it's detected at the easiest level of not letting the person into. Person basically has to prove that he's working for a company that has been registered in the market, that has a proven record. This is also very important, of at least 6 to 12 months working in the market in a legit operational way, and also that he can prove that he belongs to this company. But this is like this easiest part, and this is just the starting point. Because once you let people in, you start observing what they're doing. And this is what I was referring to in our previous talking points. We monitor these users on daily basis. We observe the patterns. We see when something is going not right. Logging in from a different place than usually, using a VPN that is weird. Suddenly starting to look for things that the company is not looking for at all, right? Looking for locations of high value goods, very common scenario also. So all these things just make you lose the authorization, as we call it, to use the public freight exchange, and you are just being banned. Interestingly enough, we also have the whole security system responding to signals that our other customers are giving to them. So this community is a very important piece of information, because they know the carrier. They used to have a conversation with him, and the conversations were including jokes, stupid side talks, right? Things that person to person would recognize, and suddenly this guy seems to be somebody totally different. Then it's also reported, and we're blocking this kind of users. It's becoming, and it has always been, a very important pillar of security. But we cannot count on human to human interaction. That's why AI, our biggest investment in AI, is not to find new customers. Is to make our customers feel secure at the platform. And this AI initiatives is our top board security initiative. Unfortunately, it's not the same, for other boards at shippers when it comes to cargo theft, because very often these cargo thefts are not even reported, not to lose insurances and things like this. That's why in all jurisdiction, what I mentioned, cargo theft is not as importantly prioritized as it should be. What we can do on our side is just to prioritize it ourselves, right?
So anyway, it sits what, third place behind price and capacity?
Absolutely. Yeah. For a regular shipper, but for those with high value goods, it's number one. That's why it's very important in this digital space that we're giving to shippers, forwarders, and carriers to differentiate, hey, what is this trade-off for you? If you are a pharma, it's security. Go for trusted carrier exchange. Like you might need to pay a premium for this, but your cargo is like bulletproof, right? We take care on regular public freight exchange. You do not get any cargo theft, because we go far and beyond, like to make sure that everybody that is in there has good intentions. But it's always this time and price and security, right? That you need to play around.
Now, Ewa, I always like to ask our guests on Logistics Business Conversations to look forward into the future. And I will remind you that I'm going to invite you back in 5 years' time.
I hope you will.
And we're going to check we're going to check how accurate you are. But if you can sort of look ahead, how do you see secure freight exchanges evolving over the next 5 years? Or, are we going to reach a point where verified digital identities become the norm, would you say, across across European road freight?
What's next in logistics? We're asking the experts. In our Crystal Ball segment, industry leaders share their predictions for the future.
So what I am sure and convinced about that security stops being like a feature you bolt on and becomes the infrastructure the whole exchange is built on. So it's the absolute basis. At the same time, verification becomes invisible from this user perspective, but it's a continuous and competitive advantage rather than friction, right? So this is very important. And the direction of travel is like from one-time gate checks, like it used to be maybe before, to always on verification. This is super important. This becomes, table stakes, the industry, not a premium differentiator, and issuer expectations become higher and higher, right?
Mm-hmm.
Second layer, I think, certification. So TAPA, TSR, ISEC, ISO and so on, EIC becomes a genuine commercial asset, right? A competitive advantage for the carriers. It's not a compliance cost anymore. We look more on the top line than the bottom line here. And this visible, verified, audited, third-party audited credentials should translate into access to better freight, better relations, better rates, which creates this top line industry and basically its standards. And I would expect more qualified networks like the Trusted Carrier Exchange that we created, where people will decide because of the security standards, right? And I hope, and I really believe, like this industry can start sharing information across industry, because the way it looks today, it's like unimaginably scattered, right? Between all the isolated islands, first forwarders and carriers. And I really believe AI will cut both ways. So on the one hand side, it's the risk, right? Because it's accelerating fraud sophistication. It's easier for everybody to think now, but it's also accelerating the way we can recognize this and the way we prevent what the thieves have no idea we'll be preventing. So that's why it's becoming so easy to fake an ID, right? Or because thieves already have learned how to do this. AI helped them, but we'll be smarter. They're doing things they don't even know they're checking at the moment. In states is worth aiming for, I think. In my ideal state, shipper is posting a load. He doesn't have to think about, any verification because the platform has already done this for him, and the platform is taking responsibility, transport it securely, because all the work has been done continuously, invisibly, without involving any user interaction. So that's my ideal answer.
So, Ewa, in conclusion, I'd say my takeaway from this conversation is that in today's sort of modern world of digital logistics, verification is just as important as those other measures that we're used to, which is, obviously price and capacity, which we mentioned, but, visibility and reliability and all of that as well. So I want to say thank you to Trans.eu for supporting this edition of Logistics Business Conversations. And also my sincere thanks to you, my guest, Ewa Węgorkiewicz. Thank you very much for sharing your insights into, I'd say, one of the industry's most important and fast evolving challenges. Also, thank you to you, our listener, for joining us today. Wherever you get your podcasts from, please do subscribe to Logistics Business Conversations, and we will deliver the next episode directly straight to you as soon as it's released. But for now, all I have to do is say thank you and goodbye to Ewa.
Thank you, Peter. It was great being here, and I see you in 5 years.
Absolutely. I'll hold you to that. And it's goodbye from me, Peter MacLeod. Until next time, goodbye.